The concept of having separate databases for each bounded context often throws people for a loop. But with the advent of microservices, which also, by definition, each have their own database, teams are beginning to get more accustomed to the idea. Here's what Eric Evans said to us when we talked with him about the problems created by trying to share a database across teams. If you're in a company where you share your database and it gets updated by hundreds of different processes, it's very hard to create the kind of models that we're talking about and then write software that does anything interesting with those models. Given that sharing a database across bounded contexts is really not a great idea, then we have another important question.
Another question that comes up often is how to sync data between the individual databases that are tied to each of the bounded contexts. Some different patterns you can use are publisher-subscriber, commonly referred to as pub-sub, and two-way synchronization. Pub-sub is definitely simpler and preferable when you can manage it. You can use different implementations like message queues, database processes, batch jobs, or synchronous API calls. It's really up to you how you want to design your synchronization between bounded contexts. The point is just that you don't get the integration for free from using a shared database.
We talked with Eric again to get his perspective on defining context boundaries. Some of the key points he shared were that, first, it's important to understand that it's never a simple task, whether you're new to it or not. And he's seen stumbling blocks of all sorts. The most common is not having a clear enough context boundary, so the effort of applying DDD isn't clearly separated from other tasks related to building software.
He also reminded us that the bounded context is such an essential ingredient that is probably the biggest stumbling block, and it's not often one that an individual on a project can usually address by themselves. It kind of has to be dealt with at the team level or even the organizational level.
In our application, we've organized the solution to make it clear where the boundaries are between our contexts. The main area that we're currently focused on is the appointment scheduling bounded context.
We've identified two other bounded contexts that are involved in the overall application, or will be eventually. For instance, it'll be important for users to be able to manage clients and their patients. The staff of the clinic also needs a way to manage their schedules, so they know who's working on different days. We're referring to these two bounded contexts as client-patient management and resource scheduling.
We also have a few parts of the application that are common to several bounded contexts.
These are cross-cutting concerns that we have consciously chosen to share. In DDD, we isolate such code into its own package referred to as a shared kernel. And it's worth noting that a bounded context does not always mean a separate application, even though we've identified several different bounded contexts.
It's also a great opportunity to consider packaging logic up into microservices. Do keep in mind, however, that there's not always a one-to-one alignment between bounded contexts and microservices or applications. Also, let's not forget that our application will definitely need a front end.
We've mentioned already that an important part of DDD is an emphasis on effective communication among the stakeholders in the project. And remember, if you're a programmer, count yourself as one of the stakeholders in whatever you're working on, since you certainly have a stake in its success. The language we use to describe the problem and how we choose to model it is key to the shared understanding we want to have with our domain experts in order to be successful. Having a single, shared, ubiquitous language helps avoid unnecessary confusion and translation within the team building the software, and is one of the fundamental practices of domain-driven design. And when I talk about the team building the software, I don't just mean the programmers. I mean the whole team, including the business people that are deriving what the software should do. The discovery of the Rosetta Stone allowed us to unlock several different languages by showing the same message in 3 different texts. We don't want to have a Rosetta Stone or any other sort of tool to help us translate between what the business is talking about and what the programmers are talking about. We want to make sure that everyone is speaking the same language the whole time so that translation is unnecessary.
Think about if you've ever used an online translation tool to round-trip a sentence. You can run into similar communication issues in your application if you're constantly having to translate to and from the domain expert terms or the programmer's terms. Here's an example of a user story for our sample system about creating appointments.
We have a lot of developer friends in Nigeria, so thought it would be fun to try out Igbo for our translation. We used a website to translate between English and Igbo a few times, and in the end, the user story has changed just enough to create confusion. Translation software is pretty good these days, and we were hoping for a more humorous result, but according to animal experts, it's close, but not the same as a veterinary technician.
But the point here, of course, isn't just relating to different international languages, but to the different languages spoken by business experts and programmers.
Incidentally, a great practice when you're discussing your system requirements with customers is to always try and explain back to them what you think it is they want the system to do, so they have an opportunity to correct your understanding of what they think they just told you.
Definitely. Remember, one of the key benefits of using a ubiquitous language is that all parties can understand it without having to perform any translation. This means when you show a test or some code to a domain expert, you don't have to explain that in the system you call something an animal when the domain expert calls it a patient.
Evans cautions that a project faces serious problems when its language is fractured. When domain experts stick to using their jargon, while the technical team members have their own language tuned to discussing the domain terms in a design, translation errors will manifest as software bugs. Neither the customer's nor the developer's language is sufficient for all parties to discuss the application effectively. What is needed is a shared, common language that incorporates and uses terms defined in the domain model. The use of this language must be ubiquitous, and the more the language is used, the more it will force deficiencies in the model into the open.
And by ubiquitous, we mean it must be used everywhere within the bounded context. The vocabulary of the language includes the names of model classes and prominent operations. The team should use these common terms in code, in diagrams, on the whiteboard, in design documents, and especially when discussing the system.
Yeah, pretty much ubiquitous means everywhere, all the time, even in that one email you're sending off to another developer. Stick to using the terms that you've agreed make sense for this bounded context.
You've heard some of our conversations that helped lead to a ubiquitous language for the scheduling app. There was another important one that happened early on between Michelle and me that we want to share with you now.
Pay attention to not only the clarification of the terms, but also to the fact that Julie and Michelle are equal partners in this conversation. Although Julie is trying to lead the conversation towards the goal of identifying the correct terms, she's careful not to make assumptions about Michelle's domain.
So, Michelle, last time you and Steve and I got together to talk, Steve and I had been working on just kind of fleshing things out and planning things. And I realized that we had some confusion over some of the common terms, like things that as real pet owners, we would kind of assume the terms are. But then when we're thinking about, business and software, we're thinking of the terms a little differently. So I was wondering if we could just sort that out with you so that we're all on the same page and using the same terms and using terms that none of us have to stop and think about what we're talking about. We'll always know what they mean.
Sure.
The first thing is we have these clients. Those are the people who own the pets. So when thinking about the software and the business, we think of them as clients, but kind of in the real world. And me, I have a pet. I go to the vet all the time. I think of myself as a pet owner. So what do you refer to those people who, bring the pets, pay their bills, call and make the appointments, etc.?
Most of the time, those would be listed as clients.
Okay, so you do call them clients. You don't worry about calling them owners. And of course, sounds kind of weird to say I own a dog, right?
He kind of owns you.
Yeah, that's more like it. You're the pro, So then what about that dog? Like, are they patients? Are they pets? Are they clients? What do you refer to the pets as?
So for the purposes of the medical record, we refer to that as the patient.
Okay. So to be client and patient.
Exactly. And actually in veterinary medicine, they talk a lot about this triad, the veterinary client-patient relationship, where all three are really important in that.
Okay, so those are actually terms that are commonly used in your industry.
Yes.
That sounds so weird, but, with vets. Cool. All right, so the next one we were also going back and forth on was an appointment or an office visit. When somebody's scheduling a visit, scheduling to come in, how do you refer to that?
So there would be two big subsets of what they might be scheduling to come in for. They might schedule a surgery, which is an easy one to define. They're going to come in, we're going to do some sort of a procedure. Usually there's going to be some anesthetic involved. That would be a surgery. And that would be outside of our normal office hours.
Oh, okay. So what about when they just come in for regular stuff?
So when they come in for regular appointments, you could call those office visits or appointments. And there are a few different subsets of those. You may have an appointment that's a wellness exam. And in that exam, we would be doing, of course, a physical examination and generally wellness treatments like vaccinations, some blood work. Generally your healthy pet who's coming in for a routine checkup.
So that's an office visit, and there's a couple of the things that come under the umbrella of office visit. But I'm also thinking about scheduling, because that's the thing we're really going to be focused on is the scheduling portion of the app. So we're always scheduling an appointment for a surgery, an appointment for an office visit, whatever type of office visit that is. So is using the term appointment, does that make sense? Would you, if I said appointment, would you think, okay, that could be a surgery, that could be a checkup, that could be whatever? This thing to be scheduled is what I want to define.
Yeah, I think you could call them all appointments, but I would differentiate between a surgery and something that's done in the office. But then I would further differentiate in the office between a wellness exam, an exam for somebody that's coming in with a problem, or an exam that doesn't need to see a doctor but could just be done by a technician like a toenail
Oh,
trim.
good. Yeah, we always need those. Clickety-clack on the floors. All right, so I think then we'll use just the overall umbrella of we'll schedule an appointment, and then we'll be more explicit about what type of an appointment that's going to be. Would that feel okay to you?
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Great. Excellent. All right, so I'll get back to Steve, and then we've got another meeting set up, I think in a few days, to just hash out some more details after Steve and I have gotten some more of our ducks in a row.
Sounds great.
Excellent. Thanks, Michelle. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Now we have a stake in the ground for our ubiquitous language. As we continue working with Michelle, not only will we learn more items for the bounded context, but there's also a chance that the ubiquitous language will evolve. Eric Evans guides us to pay attention to those changes, because a change in the ubiquitous language is also likely to mean a change in the domain model. We have to update our design to accommodate what we've learned.